Have you ever thought about using Suggestopedia in your lessons? Or maybe you think there's no better approach than the Lexical one? I'm Mary, and in this special episode of the ELT Glossary, the Human Dictionary for English Teachers, we are going to see 3 qualified ELT professionals talking about 3 different methods, so you can try them with your students and draw your own conclusions. And the 3 superstars you're going to see here are on social media. So after the video, go to the description and check their links out. And well, no blah blah blah, ready, steady, and go!
So when I think about the lexical approach, I sort of think of this kind of newfangled, revolutionary concept of how we're going to model language and redefine language teaching. But the reality is that the lexical approach is actually pretty damn old now. It started with a book written by a guy called Michael Lewis in 1993. And this was the culmination of his research and ideas about the best ways of modelling language and teaching language to language learners. He started with 2 things. 1, that LEXIS is the basis of language, and 2, that grammatical mastery is not a requirement for effective communication. So he was saying that language doesn't seem to be individual words glued together with grammatical rules between those words. Instead, it's groups or chunks of words which can be used sometimes with some flexibility. So, for example, if we take a phrase like, how's it going? How's it going? We could treat this phrase in the lexical approach according to just being one unit. So I have a unit of language in my head, how's it going? I retrieve that, and when I see someone, I say, how's it going? I don't necessarily pull out each individual word, how, and then be, and conjugate be to make is, and then make the contraction hows, and then it, and then take go, and turn that into the ing form to make the present continuous. However, some textbooks might actually have you believe that that's what's going on. Although in reality it doesn't seem to be that that's what's going on, because we produce it too quickly. We retrieve it as one chunk. How's it going? We even say it like it's one word. So this was something that Michael Lewis noticed, and he further posited that fluency was gained through the accumulation of these chunks of words, which were sometimes applied with some flexibility. How's it going is not a particularly flexible chunk. It's a pretty static unit of language, doesn't change very much. But if we take something like, for example, what would you like to eat? What would you like to do tonight? What do you want to see at the cinema? We take some things like that, then it seems like we have a lexical chunk there as well that can be applied with some flexibility, such as what would you like to, and then we've got a verb, and then we've got some optional bits. It's not like the lexical approach completely tears up the use of rules, but instead we take language chunks, larger language chunks rather than individual words, and we apply them with some flexibility and some rules for using them. Now, one of the things I personally like about the lexical approach is how it neatly kind of matches up with connected speech pronunciation. So instead of focusing on putting individual words together, then you focus on this kind of phrasal way of viewing language, and that means that whenever you're dealing with a pronunciation drill or pronunciation practice or working with pronunciation anyway whatsoever, you're looking at language in terms of these chunks, which makes a lot more sense, because a lot of phrases and a lot of chunks of language, they don't sound like individual words, they sound like a chunk of language. Like, I'm not so sure about that. Like, how many words does that really sound like? I'm not so sure about that. So for me, that's very helpful as a language learner and a language teacher, and I've observed it anecdotally being very useful for students as well. Now, as for the actual science of it, there are some studies supposedly demonstrating the effectiveness of the lexical approach. However, they do have a number of limitations, normally small sample sizes or other areas you could criticize, which basically means that 30 years after Michael Lewis published his book, we're still kind of engaged in a discussion about how lexical you want to get with the lexical approach and how much grammar still plays a role in the classroom. And personally, I think it's quite healthy to have that kind of discussion. And I think that's one of the great things that Michael Lewis brought to the English teaching world. Is not necessarily a paradigm shift, but he brought a conversation. And whenever you bring something new to the table that gives teachers options, then I think that's a good thing. So my advice would be, as it is with everything, try it in the classroom, see how it goes down, and then carve your own style of dealing with language that might be some hybrid of lexical approach and grammar approach, or one or the other.
As a teacher, I'm sure you will have experienced students with great grammar skills but struggle to speak in English. I'm Marco from English with SLLC, and over the next few minutes I'm going to share with you how the CLT approach to language teaching can help prevent this from happening. So CLT stands for Communicative Language Teaching, or as it's more commonly known, the communicative approach. Now, CLT is a teaching approach that brings to the forefront the importance of real communication in all 4 skills. What does that really mean, and is this just some kind of new craze? Well, firstly, CLT is nothing new. In fact, it's been around since the 1970s. And the purpose of its introduction was to create a learning experience, maintaining the emphasis on speaking as we do with the direct method, but favouring language function over form, and additionally focusing on all 4 skills, which are integrated into the teaching and the learning process. Now, this is achieved by using authentic materials. So, for example, a newspaper or a sports report, YouTube videos, anything, even the eat out food menu, and then we use them to engage in conversation as we would in our day-to-day life. So something that will be relevant to the learner. There are quite a few aspects to CLT, but probably the notable ones are how we approach learner error and how we use it for developing reading and writing skills. In CLT, error is seen as part of the learning process, and it's felt that a learner can be an effective communicator even with limited linguistic knowledge. Now, the teacher takes notes of any mistakes and comes back to them at a certain time of the lesson, or even during another activity when perhaps the focus is more on language accuracy. Well, one of the great things about CLT is that we can facilitate through our planning multi-skill based activities, and these can include reading and writing. And this is called the integrated approach. So, for example, you may get the learner to watch a YouTube video or ask them to write something about it, expressing their views. Do they agree? Do they disagree? Or you may get them to simply write a comment. But what they are doing is interacting with real language they can come to recognize and use. Well, as you probably gathered by now, compared to our function as a teacher using the direct method, our role and emphasis has become one of a facilitator. Now, this is because the learner is at the center of all we do whilst we're using the CLT approach. This also means that the lesson activities, accuracy and fluency planning are integral to the success of this process. So here are some simple ways for you to introduce CLT into your teaching. The first way is something that I call investigating for information. So having first created a scenario, the purpose of this exercise is for one person to find out from their partner, or maybe you the teacher, missing information. Now, this can be words, numbers, or pretty much anything really. Open discussion. Now, you know how this works. Through discussion, we share differing opinions and ideas on a predetermined topic. But don't underestimate the planning required for these to be successful. Now, certainly one of the most fun and engaging has to be role play. Here we create an imaginary situation where, as themselves, they go to the doctors, a restaurant, complain about something, buy a car, you know the kind of thing. We are effectively, after all, creating an opportunity for the learner to practice something that they will probably experience in real life. So authenticity is a prerequisite.
Hi, I'm Neil of ELT Under the Covers, and I'm taking a look at a teaching methodology called Suggestopedia. Suggestopedia was developed by Georgi Loznov, a Bulgarian scientist, in the 1970s. He's considered the father of accelerated learning, and he was looking to integrate psychology and pedagogy together to speed up learning. It was considered very experimental, and many suggested that it was pseudoscience. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The two main thrusts of Suggestopedia, from my estimation, are one, creating an optimal state of learning, and two, mimicking natural language processes. Georgi had this idea of playing Baroque music, and that activated alpha brain waves that help us learning, having comfy chairs, lots of plants, dim lights in the classroom. It sounds kind of romantic, but he considered this a way of creating an optimal state of learning. Now, I find the idea of creating a relaxed, stress-free atmosphere in class to be essential. Although you might not be able to recreate Georgi's classroom, finding ways to make your students feel comfortable enough to make mistakes and play with the language, in my estimation, can only enhance their learning potential. So a typical Suggestopedia class starts with what's called a deciphering phase, where a teacher narrates and acts out a piece of text as the students follow along with their own copies of the text. Then the students are paired together and they try to do the same narration and acting out in what's called a concert session. Then there's further elaboration after a teacher's review. Now, I feel this method mimics the very way we and children acquire language. They watch their caregivers as they go about their day, and they pick up the vocabulary and language structures that they observe, and they then attempt to recreate and play around with the language. I feel this discovery and reenactment method to be a very natural way to acquire language, and it works with the grain of our brain, basically. If you're looking to find out more from myself, then I would check out ELT Under the Covers on YouTube. Thank you.
All right, beautiful human beings. As always, I just want to say thank you guys, for taking the time to help me with this project. If you haven't checked the other episodes yet, go and do it. There are 6 episodes currently available. And if you are taking a teaching qualification course, this information can be really useful for your course and, well, for your life as a teacher. So happy teaching, guys.